Hello everybody, this is Tyler here once again from the Character Workshop. Once again, another new season, and once again another new hat. So for the very start of Season 5 of It Came From England, I will be doing a review of the second Doctor Who story ever made, and also the very first appearance of Doctor Who's most well-known villains. It is the first appearance of the Daleks, and today I'm going to be reviewing the story that they were introduced in, simply called The Daleks. So, the story starts out with the TARDIS landing in a weird petrified jungle, and, the crew decides to go out, and the Doctor asks Susan to check for radiation, and Susan looked at the radiation meter, and she said it seemed fine. And as soon as they all walk out, you do see, the radiation meter slowly turning towards danger after they left. So, throughout like the first episode of the Daleks, the crew's determining what kind of environment or what kind of planet they were on. And while they were going through the jungle, they all noticed a little futuristic looking city, further down the line. And the Doctor wanted to, investigate on it, while Ian and Barbara were, not very keen on going through it. And meanwhile, while they were back in the forest and went back to the TARDIS, Susan felt somebody touch her, and she freaked out, and despite the Doctor, not believing her, she was still convinced that, that someone was out there. And to further prove that, when they came back out of the TARDIS, they see a box of vials laid in front of the TARDIS, and then that later convinced Susan that, that there officially was somebody around. And obviously the Doctor later claimed that the fluid link for the TARDIS is running low on mercury, so they wouldn't be able to, travel their way out of there. And so everybody had no other choice but to, just travel to the city to hopefully find more mercury. And while they were searching around the city, Barbara becomes separated from the rest of the crew, and then she encounters, basically what would become the Daleks for the very first time, and probably one of the more iconic shots and iconic cliffhangers from this story, where you see her reaction, see her screaming, and you only just see, the Daleks' arms. And not before long, everybody else in the TARDIS crew, the Doctor, Ian, and Susan, also got captured by the Daleks, and they were all, sent towards basically a little jail containment, I guess. I don't know. And also, one thing I want to point out, when they were, when the rest of the crew were in that little confinement, I noticed there were seats in there, which is kind of weird, because, the Daleks don't need seats. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So, the crew later had Susan go and retrieve those, the anti-radiation drugs that were in the TARDIS, because the Doctor realized that the vials that they randomly got, that's what they were for. And while she was on her way to catch them, she encounters another group of creatures, but unlike the Daleks, which were pretty metal-looking in appearance, the creatures that she encountered are more resembling towards humans, and those other creatures were referred to as the Thals, who used to be at war with the Daleks. And the one Thal who left the drugs revealed that he encountered Susan in the forest, which was why a lot of these later events happened. And in the meantime, Susan, attempts to, bring peace, between, both the Thals and the Daleks, and while everybody thinks it seems to work, the Daleks eventually betray the Thals, when they set up a little food trap, I guess you could kind of call it, where they had food out, pretend like they're becoming at peace with the Thals, but then the Daleks just, attacked them, and ended up killing one of the Thals higher ups in the process. And the Daleks afterwards attempt to use the anti-radiation drugs, but then they soon discover that the drugs are fatal to the Daleks themselves. And in order to combat that, the Daleks say they need more radiation to survive, and they decide to, throw another neutron bomb to, increase the radiation in the atmosphere of Skaro. And while the Doctor and his companions were away from the Daleks, they were back in the forest with the Thals, and they soon learned their side of the story when it came to, the history of Skaro. And they learned that, the Thals were actually pacifists compared to the Daleks, who were absolutely not. And unfortunately, the crew was unable to leave Skaro because, the fluid link they accidentally left with the Daleks. So, in order to, retrieve them, the TARDIS crew split up and, tried to get into the city to get back the vials. Of course, unfortunately, the Doctor and Susan end up getting captured. And then the Thals, of course, throughout, this portion of the story, learned about the importance of aggression and warfare, and then they manages to lead the Thals to, get their attack on the Daleks and, bring an end to, this war that they've been having. And at the end, it is believed that, the Daleks have been destroyed with the power supply being knocked out, which, of course, if you guys have seen my, my previous Doctor Who videos, we all know that's definitely not true. The TARDIS crew then leaves Skaro, but while they were leaving and going somewhere else, the TARDIS, explodes, and then it knocks everybody out, which is also leads to the events of the next story, which I'll be reviewing at another time. So story-wise, that was pretty much the Daleks in quite a nutshell. And in terms of how long the story was, it was actually, unlike the Unearthly Child, which was 4 episodes long, this story was almost twice as long. This was 7 episodes. And yeah, so when it came to me watching it, I watched the first 4 episodes, in one sitting, and then later on I watched the other 3 episodes in another sitting. So, and honestly, I think that I pretty much benefited from that, because I feel like if I was to watch that whole entire 7 episode story in one sitting, I'd probably lose a lot of interest, really quickly. And I think in general that's my only minor complaint about the Daleks is just for the fact that it's pretty long. I feel like they could have made the story just a little bit shorter, especially around the later episodes, because I feel like the portion with the crew being split up to try to get back those try to get back the TARDIS Mercury, I feel like that part didn't really need to be there, especially the portion, I feel like there was a bit too much time focused on this particular part, where Ian and Barbara were with a bunch of Thals, and they were going through a cave to try to get into the city. I feel like that definitely dragged on for too long, but like I said, that's kind of mostly my only minor complaint about this. I guess if I was to nitpick on one other thing, I feel like the Daleks were kind of too easily defeated in this story. I don't know. I do know that this is the first story with the Daleks, but I feel like their defeat was just a bit too rushed, I guess. And like I said, a bit too easy. I honestly didn't think the Thals would be able to easily just grab onto the Daleks and just do whatever. And there's also, speaking of destroying the Daleks, there's actually a part of the story that I didn't mention before. So when the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Susan were trying to break out of their little confinements, they had a plan to try and destroy one of the Daleks that came in there, and also just to sneak their way out. So they had a plan. So Susan, during this event in the story, got some sort of a cloth from one of the Thals, and they decided to use that as a little trap on the Dalek. So they put it on the floor, and they tricked the Dalek into coming in there, and the Dalek, of course, wasn't able to move, and pretty much ended up dying because of it. So then both the Doctor and Ian, took the head off the Dalek, and they do actually get a look at what was on the inside of the Dalek, but we as the audience didn't really get to see it very well, so they just took the little Thal cloth and just grabbed it and wrapped it and then put it down somewhere. And throughout the rest of that portion of the story, Ian went inside the Dalek body and, you know, pretended to be a Dalek, you know, escorting the Dr. Barbara and Susan, you know, to somewhere else. And yeah, that was pretty interesting. I honestly wasn't expecting that. Especially in the first story with the Daleks, interesting. And also, another thing that I kind of like about this story, speaking of the Daleks, is that they don't really, you know, the story doesn't really reveal too much about, like, what the Daleks actually look like inside their little cases. You know, we do see glimpses a little bit, like, I know after the crew left the little confinements, you know, underneath that Thal layer, you do see, like, some little, you know, tentacles coming out. And also when the Thals were explaining their side of the story to, you know, the rest of the TARDIS crew, they had these little pictures of, like, what the Thals and the Daleks looked like, you know, before this war and mutation happened. And we get to see, like, what the Thals looked like, but then, like, you know, we do see Ian, you know, take a look at the Dalek, and we don't actually get to see, from his point of view, what it looked like. He was like, oh, really? So that's what they looked like. So I do like how they kept that a mystery. Definitely pretty interesting. In terms of how I think the characters themselves are treated, at least the main four characters, I think, you know, with a few exceptions, they're kind of portrayed, you know, pretty decent. You know, I didn't have too many problems with the first Doctor in this story. Barbara's good as always. Ian, I do kind of want to talk about a little bit. I kind of feel like, you know, throughout most of this story, like, I feel like Ian was pretty, you know, authoritarian, I guess. I don't know, like, trying to be, like, you know, the main guy, the main go-getter, I guess, you know, which usually you don't see that nowadays with a lot of the male companions in Doctor Who. Like, I've never seen, you know, Jamie act like this around the second Doctor, or freaking Harry acting like this around the fourth Doctor. It is kind of strange for me. I don't know, but I mean, besides that, I still like Ian as a character, you know, and he's definitely better than, like, you know, he's still definitely better than Susan, you know. Susan, for the most part, still kind of portrayed, you know, how she sort of is, kind of like, you know, the overall screamer of the group, you know. It's, yeah. So that's kind of how I want to say about the characters. But in terms of the story, you know, the story, despite, you know, dragging on for, like, very long, is, like, you know, definitely a lot better than Unearthly Child. You know, I definitely feel like it was, you know, it got its point across a little bit better. Definitely a lot more interesting stuff going on, obviously. So I think overall I do like the Daleks, you know. The amount of episodes there are, you know, otherwise, I do think it's, you know, generally a pretty decent story. Definitely a little bit better than Unearthly Child, so for that reason alone, I will give the Daleks a rating of 7.5 out of 10. And with that being said, that's about it for my little review and discussion of story number 2 of Doctor Who, The Daleks. So if you guys have seen this story, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you guys like have any other Doctor Who story suggestions in the future, let me know in the comments down there too. And with that being said, that's about it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more episodes of It Came From England, or just Media Network Plus content in general. Leave a comment down below, let me know what you think. That's about it. This is Tyler from The Character Workshop, signing out. Next episode's gonna be a little bit tricky, because it honestly depends on, like, you know, what happens within the next, like, month or so. If the episode's, like, you know, gonna be made before Christmas time, it'll be, you know, it'll be something interesting. I'll let you guys know what it is. But like I said, the subject of the next episode may change, but only time will tell.